I get sent a lot of videos. In fact, some of y'all send me videos every damn day, even though I follow some of the same people y'all follow. So I've probably seen the video, but that is a rant for another day. Today's rant, or fuck it, I'm bothered, if you will, is based off a video that was sent to me on Instagram, and later I saw that comedian and opinionist D.L. Hughley also posted it on his Instagram page. It's a clip from a podcast called Smitty and D, a father and daughter podcast team. And while I was unfamiliar with this podcast before this clip, I got familiar after watching it. It's a good podcast, available on YouTube. Definitely some interesting discussions and interviews on there, and you should check it out. But anyway, here is the clip I'm talking about.
How do you feel about reality TV?
I hate it.
Why?
It destroys the image of black women in America. As the black woman goes, so goes black society. So let's review. You would be hard-pressed to find a show where you actually see black women who are actual entrepreneurs, not some fun little boutique in the mall, not a kiosk, not I've got an eyelash line, but actual entrepreneurs. You know what you do see, though? A bunch of women who are throwing drinks at each other, talking bad about each other, talking about each other, smiling in each other's faces, backstabbing, and then talking about how this baby daddy loves me more than he loves you, and I'm still sleeping with him even though he's with me and not with you. Like, it becomes a whole thing, and then that image goes out into the world. So then you wonder why so many black women are quote unquote not protected, not respected, treated like they're animals. You wonder why when you go to a hospital they say, oh, she don't need anesthesia, because you're strong and independent, because that's the image that's out there.
Whole lot to unpack there. The gentleman who gave us that breakdown that I've got all kinds of pushback for is Dave Anderson, who also is known as the business bully. He's an entrepreneur and business coach out of Philadelphia, and it appears that he's pretty successful and good at what he does. This was part of a wide-ranging conversation where they discussed his backstory, business tips, and his advice for aspiring entrepreneurs. Now, in fairness, he did not limit his comments to just what he thought of some black women on reality shows. He also has some words for black men.
And then let's not get started on what they do to black men. They're either completely emasculated or there's some type of thug Tupac caricature that completely eliminates the ability to express our intelligence, our creativity, and our need to not only protect, provide, but actually nurture a woman in a place where she can feel safe to be who she is.
Now, before I tell you where he's wrong, let me tell you where he is right. We should always be mindful of our images and how we're portrayed. We should definitely ask thoughtful, critical questions about why these images exist. Who stands to benefit from these images? And as Dave Anderson also pointed out, we should be very aware of who is making the decisions about how we are being portrayed.
And then on top of that, you can't point to a reality show that does not have somebody who does not look like us at the helm, up to including the love and hip hop ones, because everybody focuses on how bad Mona Scott is, but nobody says anything about Jim Ackerman.
For those not familiar with Jim Ackerman, he's a white man who apparently was part of a team that included 3 other white men who, along with Mona Scott Young, created the Love and Hip Hop franchise, which first aired in 2010. And Dave Anderson is not wrong. A lot of black-centered reality TV isn't created or owned by us, though it is heavily consumed by us and a mainstay in our culture. Now, Andy Cohen, as we know, built the Real Housewives empire and became the face of Bravo television. And this is why the presence of someone like Carlos King is important. He's a black man from my hometown of Detroit who created the Love and Marriage franchise that is extremely successful on OWN. Now let me push back on some of what else Dave Anderson said and tell you where he is absolutely wrong. Now, one of my issues with how conversations like these are framed is that it's steeped in the idea that black people have to prove we are worthy of respect, dignity, and humanity. Our existence isn't enough. We have to somehow earn dignity within those same systems of oppression that were designed to disregard us in the first place. We have to dress a certain way, act a certain way, look a certain way. It's the racialized version of, oh, she was sexually assaulted, but what was she wearing? How much was she drinking? Was she flirting? According to Dave Anderson, because Candace Dillard and Monique Samuels once fought on Real Housewives of Potomac, because Kimbella threw a drink at Yandy on Love and Hip Hop, because Rennie and Erica Banks started tossing Moscato at each other, then I should walk around with the expectation that as a black woman, I deserve to be disrespected and am therefore unprotected. So, using this logic, that means if these shows didn't exist, if nary a white Russian had been thrown, then black women would be widely respected. It means black women wouldn't be disproportionately dying during childbirth because of medical professionals who don't respect or value our insight and instinct about our own bodies. It means that if it weren't for the existence of Jocelyn Hernandez, black women wouldn't be paid 64% of what non-Hispanic white men are paid. And 1 in 4 black girls wouldn't be sexually abused by the time they're 18 years old. If it were that simple, I'd personally burn the Love and Hip Hop franchise to the ground. But by pushing that idea that only some of us, or a certain kind of us, are worthy, that's a more dangerous trope than any fight I've ever seen on a reality show. White folks automatically get the benefit of the doubt and the benefit of sympathy and empathy. It doesn't matter if Sherry Papini faked her own kidnapping in 2016 for 3 weeks to spend time with an ex-boyfriend. The next time a white woman goes missing, the police and media will jump all over it and use every resource to find this woman. It doesn't matter that Teresa Giudice went to prison for 11 months for fraud. Nobody's gonna call her a thug and say that she's making white women look bad. White women are free to present any way they want without it undermining how delicately they are treated in this society. As for black women, not so much.
You're loud, you're boisterous, you're weave wig wearing, you got snuffle up against eyebrows out to here, you got a BBL that's killing you and your thighs don't match.
That was a little harsh. Now, this is not about fighting for the right to do the same awful things that some white people do and face as little retribution or consequences as possible. I'm addressing the operating principle of white supremacy, which is that black folks are inherently inferior and less deserving. It's also a huge miss to denigrate the women on these shows who have started their own businesses, particularly those who have started them in the black beauty industry. Black consumers accounted for spending roughly $6.6 billion on beauty brands, but black beauty brands took home just 2.4% of all revenue. So maybe you should be welcoming these quote-unquote little eyelash companies. In our community, we worry way too much about what white folks think about us. Those white people who choose to lean into the worst stereotypes and perceptions of who we are do that because they want to. And because they believe we are not equal. We can all dress in business casual, wear our hair like Condoleezza Rice, and act as sanctified as an old school church mother on First Sunday. And the people that want to think the worst of us would still maintain that same superior attitude toward us. Besides, the harsh realization is that programming usually follows the people. All of y'all ain't out there watching PBS. And if we're being real, part of the reason you don't see more balance in the programming in terms of how we're portrayed and represented is because y'all don't support. My good brother Roland Martin, who is one of the few black owners of a black media company, points this out all the time. We complain there isn't enough news or depth to our stories, but when it comes down to supporting those programs that give you exactly that, our viewing habits tell a different story. BET didn't get rid of the nightly news because it was so popular. They got rid of it because it was the opposite. And it also was expensive. There'll be more balance in what you want to see when you actually vote for it with your remote. Stay unbothered.